Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Tech Recruitment podcast. I have a special guest for you guys here today. His name is Adriaan Kolff. Adriaan is the co-founder and the CEO of a company called Matcher. He's an investor in HR tech. He's a serial entrepreneur, and we are going to talk about his experience with recruitment. So he has co-founded this company, Matcher. He has about 30 to 40 sourcers in the team who work for clients. So he knows a thing or two about tech recruitment. So we will talk about also productivity, how can recruiters get more productive and how they can thrive in IT recruitment or IT sourcing. So this is going to be a great interview. Stay with us. Adriaan, thanks a lot for joining us. Welcome on the podcast. And why don't you tell us at first, why have you actually co-founded the company, Matcher?
I was running a recruitment agency in Amsterdam. And I saw that we did 360 recruitment, and I saw that my recruiters were either very good on the client side or very good on the candidate side. So when I started to look a little bit more closely on that process, I realized that actually the sourcing of candidates is a very different process versus the commercial aspect and managing the candidates. And I also saw pretty different character traits in the people that were either good at the candidate side of the actual sourcing versus the recruiters that were actually very good on much more of the commercial side. So the thing that they were good at, I didn't need to motivate them because that came naturally for them. The thing that they weren't so good at, and it cost them time and energy, that's where I often had to manage them much closer in order to make them productive. So when I looked at that overall process, I realized, hey, these are two very distinct functions actually, with even different people good at it. So that was my first hunch. And then my second hunch was during that time I started to invest. So this is 2016. I started to invest for the first time. And actually I was very lucky. The first investment we did immediately blew up and started to grow very, very rapidly. And I saw firsthand as an investor is that their recruitment team simply didn't have time to scale up on the pace that the business needed. And back then, at least in the Netherlands, the alternatives were either work with relatively expensive agencies or try to scale up your internal team as quickly as possible or work with an expensive freelance tech recruiter. And this was specifically on tech. So I was looking, why isn't there a solution that fits those type of companies well? Because, rapidly scaling companies, they quickly need to build their recruitment function. Why don't you have a temporary recruitment solution? So when I was looking at both of these things from a different perspective, right, one as an investor and one as an entrepreneur in the recruitment industry, I came up with the idea of Matcher to offer dedicated remote recruitment support, but fully embedded into a client's team. And I think my eureka moment there was because I was looking for a solution first in the Netherlands, right? I didn't immediately have to have this grand idea. Is when I spoke to a freelance recruiter and he told me he had two sourcers, and that was the first time that I actually got familiar to the term sourcer, working for him from Romania in his own LinkedIn account. And because of this, he was not doing 1 to 2 placements per month, but 3 to 4. And that's the moment when, and then I asked him, his name was Richard. I will never forget, I asked him, Richard, if that works so well, why don't you put 10 people there? And then he looked at me, Adriaan, that sounds like work. And that's what I don't want to do. I was like, okay, but I do want to put the work in. And that's where I came up with the idea of Matcher of, setting up an office somewhere abroad to offer with the same amount of quality of people, dedicated recruitment support for fast growing companies on a subscription basis, with the flexibility of scaling up and down based on the business needs for the price of a senior in-house recruiter. And when I pitched this to my current co-founder, he was looking at the exact same model for his executive search agency, and he couldn't find it. So he had already done the market research. I had the idea to really build a company around it, and he said, "Let's do this together." And that's how we started Matcher. And then we looked at many different countries, and Ukraine in the end turned out to be the most favorable country. And I moved in October 2018 to Kiev, Ukraine, to open up an office and to hire my team there.
Interesting. That's really inspiring. And also the name of the company, Matcher, right? You are matching those managers or CTOs, you are matching them with recruiters, but you also match developers with opportunities eventually, right? So and
Yeah.
then you
Yeah.
also matched yourself with the co-founder. So lots of matching going on,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah. Definitely.
it's also really cool how you play to everyone's strength, right? You mentioned that you find people who are who are strong in the sourcing part. I imagine some introverts, right, or people who gravitate to just sit in front of the screen and source people, right? Like it's like with developers, you would not ask developers to go out there and sell something to people because it would
Yeah.
not be a great match. So that's really interesting. How do you think about it? How do you even determine who is a good fit for this sourcing job?
Yeah, it's a great question, and trust me, the first year we really struggled of really finding, okay, this is a true sourcer, and this is much more of a recruiter. Because in the end, I'm not gonna lie, and I was definitely biased. I was looking for many more Adrians, and I'm an extreme extrovert, and I really like data, but for me, I was hiring way too many like high energy, very empathetic, and very extroverted people, and I asked them to be sourcers. So
Mm.
despite this all theoretically, like, oh yeah, and like these are going to go course sourcers, after 4 or 5 months in, tell me when can I go and recruit? No, you're a sourcer. Wait, no, like you need to
Yeah.
continue the source, right? So it took us time to really define it, and it's still one of the questions that we always ask people when we interview is, where do you want to grow your career? Very standard question, right? But especially on the sourcing side, it's very important because are people in sourcing to become recruiters, or are people in sourcing to continue to develop themselves in sourcing? And that
Mm-hmm.
pool is relatively small, right? So typical sourcer is more introverted, likes to work with data, is okay with spending hours on end scrolling through profiles and finding the right candidates, and is very good of staying in that flow state and not get distracted, right? So that's typically a good sourcer. Where a typical good recruiter, and again, this is I'm generalizing a little bit, but like typically is very extroverted, right? Very empathetic, is good at immediately building a connection with someone, but also often likes to do many things, right? Multiple candidates in the process, interviewing here, working with hiring managers, pushing them through the process, good at stakeholder management. And both sources and recruiters, what I've seen are both very result driven, but at different elements, right? For the recruiter, it's also like really of closing that role, seeing the joy on both the hiring manager and also from a candidate perspective, where for the sourcer it can really be on the moment that they find the right profile after like moving going through the weeds, right? So that's kind of like how we try to make that distinction. And what's very important within Matcher, and anyone like thinking of like splitting these roles, sourcing is on the exact same level as recruiters, right? So they have the exact same pay, they have the exact kind of like salary career progression that they can make within our company, and they're treated as such, right? So that's if you treat sources as a junior recruiter function, you are going to get junior recruiter functions, right? So that's important.
That's very cool. And now when I'm listening to you, I just think about how difficult really recruitment is, right? Some people just look at recruiters as like, you guys just arrange interviews and that's pretty much it, right? Just send me some CVs. But
Yeah.
when you really dive deeper, you have all these sourcers and people who screen candidates and people who arrange interviews and sell to candidates, and then they sell candidates to hiring managers, right? And they need to have different skills for each of these activities. So it's really interesting to dive deeper, and someone as passionate as you about recruitment can really tweak and polish it properly. So that's very cool, very cool. And you are also passionate about entrepreneurship, right? So you started this company.
Yeah.
I saw also on your profile that you co-founded some other companies in the past. So what's in it actually for you? Like, what drives you in this sense? Like, why entrepreneurship? Why you are not a recruiter yourself?
Yeah, great question. I guess as many, right? I kind of like fell into recruitment. So I started my career first at Unilever, a very big corporate. Did that for 4 years, 2 years in finance and 2 years in marketing. And in year 3, I realized that it wasn't the switch from finance to marketing that was like making me happy, but I just didn't get energy of being able to do things that I wanted to do. And I'm borderline ADHD. My teachers at high school probably said, yes, he has ADHD. My mom always said, no, he's just a busy and energetic kid, right? So borderline ADHD. I want to do stuff, right? So I when I think of something, I want to put it in progress. I'm excited for it, and I think that's also like where my strength is thinking of things and then just doing it, and then see where we land to that extent. And with Unilever, I was very chained in that extent. So certain point I was looking for was like, I want to be more in that action driven. I want to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't know how, right? I was constantly thinking, and I was talking to many friends. It's like, we should do something, or we should have an idea, but none of us really had the balls to actually make that step. And then I got asked by someone that I actually did a project for during my student times to become partner at a small digital recruitment agency back then. And he offered me the chance to buy myself into the company, never worked or done anything in recruitment. And he just said, hey, you're an extreme go-getter. You are smart. You have a big network. We could use your help in a company. Do you want to join? It was a small company, right? Eight people and more interns than actual full-time FTEs, right? Like that's how the company was run. And I did. And that's where two things fell, completely at place, and I fell in love with both the entrepreneurship, because all of a sudden I was in an entrepreneurial environment with two co-founders that had done it for a long period of time, and then secondly, the recruitment industry. And I realized is that something that I always love to do, and that comes very naturally for me, is connecting and helping people. Is now I could make a living out of it. I was like, this is amazing, right? Like, and also like very tangible results very quickly. Where versus Unilever, I was working on a project launch. And often I would move to a new job before that thing even hit the market, right? Like, so I now had the ability to, when I thought about something, to put it in the market, test it, and just go for it, basically. And that's kind of like how my road to entrepreneurship started. But given how kind of like borderline ADHD I am as well, I really struggled with myself as well. Like probably the first 2 years, and I struggled for many reasons. Is my biggest struggle was not having a boss, because now I was my own boss, and being your own boss is extreme freedom, which is amazing. But I found it very difficult to structure my days, my weeks, my months, and my years. Like, what am I going to work on if no one holds me accountable? At Unilever, I knew exactly what was expected from me. I had this brand that I was working for. At the end, this is your turnover needs to be. These are your product launches. Make sure that these product launches happen. And I had a boss that checked on a weekly basis how I was doing on that progress, right? And it wasn't like complete machinery factory, but that's what it came down to. And he had a boss, and he had a boss, right? All went up there. And it was this very well-oiled machine where everyone played their role in very predefined roles. Now I had nothing. There was zero structure. And also my co-founders weren't holding. Yes, we held each other accountable, but it was all other Adrians, right? Like, but like with much more experience, but like very energetic, like, let's do this, let's go for it. And then I was a deer in a headlight many days, and wasting a lot of time on things that got never finished, things that I wasn't sure like whether they were the right thing. And I really struggled with that. And I'll tell you a little more. And on top of that, and the second thing that I struggled with, I was in the recruitment industry that I've never been in, right? That I didn't know, that I didn't understand. I knew it from the outside, and I understood like how to like kind of like connect people. And what I now know but didn't do then is I didn't do my homework, right? Like I was kind of like winging it. So I just got in there, like started talking to people, like interesting. I was like, okay, I understand how this thing works. But I didn't take the time to recruit. Like I didn't spend a week on the phone just calling candidates or sourcing candidates or doing digital marketing that was a big thing in our company, right? I understood the guys that were doing it. I understood well enough to have a conversation with them and kind of like sense of direction. But I didn't take the time to really go into the mechanics of the recruitment industry. And that's something I should have done. And now when I started Matcher, I did do, but yeah, that's you need to learn and see stuff before you often realize your mistakes in the past. So that's kind of like how I rolled into it.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I had a few flashbacks just when you say that you probably also tend to jump from one project to another. Like that actually happens to me. You know, like I'm also this kind of person who likes to start new projects from scratch or new products or plan launches. And yeah, sometimes this is the biggest curse, right? Because as a your own boss, you don't have anyone who holds you accountable unless you assign someone or you agree with someone. So do you have anyone who holds you accountable these days? What's your hack in this sense?
Yeah, so it has probably taken me 7 years before I finally found a system that works very, very well for me and that I'm very passionate about, right? Is and luckily I did the research, right? So when I started Matcher, and this is kind of like a story leading up to where I came from, right? So when I started Matcher, and I just explained to you like what the business concept is, I started a recruitment outsourcing company in a country where I'd never lived or worked, let alone set up a company, but I'd never recruited. I had never used a paid version of LinkedIn. And in those years prior to setting up Matcher, I had never built a Boolean string and or sourced a candidate on LinkedIn. Never.
Oh,
But still,
wow.
I thought it was a good idea to set up a recruitment outsourcing company in a different country from scratch, right?
That sounds quite crazy.
And the good thing was because I was so naive, and often this is why innovation happens kind of like from the outside, right? Often from the outside of the industry. I'm not saying that they were so innovative, but like I went in there with the 100% belief and knowing that there was a business model for this. And the reason why I knew that because we started to talk to clients very very early on before we even had anything, right? So and the majority of the people that we spoke to were like very interested. Once you're up and running, we'll be your first client, right? So we had that kind of like in the bag. So that gave me a lot of confidence. When I started hiring people, because I had to hire people, I realized I had no idea what good looked like in the recruitment because I'd never recruited myself. I understood how the mechanics worked from kind of the outside, but I'd never done it myself. So my first 6 to 9 months, I honestly worked 80 to 90 hours every week because I was living by myself in Ukraine, in Kiev at the time. I had zero social life. The only thing I was focused on was Mitcher. I watched every single video of social talent. I watched every single video of social talent to understand how recruitment worked because I had to hire recruiters, I had to manage them, I had to teach them how to structure their work, how Boolean insert the end and the or. I had no idea. I had to build training programs for junior sourcers who later turned out to be wanted to be recruiters, right? But like in order to teach them that stuff. And on top of that, I was trying to navigate the Ukrainian landscape in terms of okay, how to set everything up from a legal tax and office point of view. Um, and I had my first clients working with that I had to like understand how the mechanics worked in terms of doing recruitment, but remotely, and how to stay involved in their processes and how to onboard them, how to really understand what they were looking for, and then train my recruiters again on that, right? So this was all in this pressure cooker of building this company without ever having done the real work. And the reason why I'm leading up to this example is the only reason why I was able to pull this off is because I was willing to put the work in, right? So I honestly dare to say is that first year I did take holidays, but that first year when I was working, every single minute of the day, I was laser focused on Matcher. And what helped, what was extremely helpful, is that I was in Kiev with no social life, so there was no distraction on that end. My now wife, she was living in New York, so once in a while I would fly to New York, or we would see each other somewhere else in the world. But even then, when I was with her, I was working, right? So I was so focused of getting this company up the ground. And now 3 years later, because I was willing to put that work in, we are now with 34 people, like working for these amazing brands. We're for the first time this third year, we're finally very profitable, right? The future is looking very bright for our company, which is amazing. But I was in the exact same position that some of our listeners today will be in when I started the company. I had no idea about recruitment, never done it, right? I just had an idea. I just went for it and I was willing to put all of those hours in, right? So that's one. Like, and I gave you the example last time, was like, think about yourself when you work. sorry, let me rephrase about this, right? Like if you look at the most successful people in general, right? One of the traits that all of them have is one, they're very talented at what they do, but talent only gets you so far, right? And the second thing is they're just willing and disciplined to put the work in. And especially in recruitment, you see this very well, right? If you look at the agency recruiters, the ones that climb up, that are constantly the highest billers, right? And this is happens. And I talk to many agency owners, right? And I've done my research. What defines them is the people that are willing to every day put the same focus and discipline in terms of their work and knowing what they need to do in order to be successful. And the guys and women that often turn to be agency owners are then the ones that say, I can do this myself and do it for myself. They're willing to make that plunge and then put the extra hours in next to their own billing of training a team, hiring a team, building a culture. And then 3-4 years later, all of a sudden, they have a team of 5, of 10, of 15, of 20, or maybe even larger. And that's for the first time when they are able to take a step back, right? But because they're willing, instead of the 40-hour work week, put 60 hours in or even 80 hours in 1 month, they're 1 week ahead of their peers, right? So in 12 months, that's 12 weeks. So that's 4 months that you have ahead of your peers. In a year, that's 8 months. In 2 years, that's a year, right? Like, so within 3 years, you have worked a year longer, 1 year of more experience, 1 year of more talking to candidates, 1 year of talking more to clients, 1 year of more talking to hiring managers, right? 1 year of more reading about your industry. It's so quickly you will be able to outperform your peers because you're willing to put the work in.
So you can actually accelerate your career just by working more compared to some of your peers, right? Because if you work 80 hours and someone works 40 hours, then you don't just earn more, but you also accelerate your career, which is that's very interesting. That's very interesting angle, because people sometimes just look at those who work a lot, like, you guys are greedy, you go after all these clients, and why don't you spend more time with family? I'm not talking about you, but just in general, right? There can be this sentiment. But if we look at it through the other lenses, it's just we want to accelerate the growth, compared to some of our peers, and we want to just get the result faster. Then this is a great way, really, to approach this. It's really interesting optics, which I guess not too many people look at it this way. So I'm really glad that you are talking about this on the podcast, because people can start thinking about their career also differently, and then put some more hours in their work or studies, which, as you mentioned as well, is really important. So the videos that you went through are really cool. So you learned a lot about the industry, and then you started also training and coaching your colleagues. Very cool.
And so, because I had to, right? Like I was forced. I had to. So that's how my hand was forced, because I knew in order to be successful, I within a year I had to be a senior tech recruiter, right? Like I had to get on that level, because otherwise how was I going to define whether they were good, and how could I help them grow in their career, right? So that was the absolutely key. The one thing I do want to mention, right, is also for listeners, like, oh my, this is a workaholic, like I don't want to work 80 hours. What is it kind of advice? I'm just saying this in terms of mindset, right? And there's no right or wrong here, right? But that's the one thing that I notice with a lot of people. They have a lot of wishes, but are not willing to put the work in. So either lower your wishes, because otherwise that's gonna be constantly like a sense of irritation or obligation almost, in terms of what the work is that you want to put in, or put the work in. Right?
That makes sense.
And that's really, really key in that sense, because often people say, I don't have enough time. But it's never about time, right? Elon Musk has the same amount of time as we have. He's built these giant companies, right, in a short period of time. He's now the richest man in the world. And I'm not saying that that should be your goal whatsoever, but I'm just using this as an example, right? He also has 24 hours in a day, but he's notoriously working every day, 7 days per week, 52 weeks. He doesn't take holidays. or like his holidays are like, meeting the president somewhere, or like hanging out with Richard Branson on his island. Like I don't know what this guy does, right? Like, but that's kind of like his mindset to work, and he's been able to pull it off, because that's where he wants to prioritize his time. So it's not about not having enough time; it's where do you prioritize your time, and
And
it's
that
important.
comes.
And it's important that you understand that for yourself, right? Like, where do you prioritize your time, and where do you want to prioritize your time?
Mhm.
If you say that you don't have enough time, no, you're saying I spend my time on other things that are more important to me, or that I prioritize over what I might want to do, right? And that's the mindset what you need to look at. And a lot of people say like, I want to exercise more. Then you say, okay, get up an hour earlier, because no one takes that hour away. Try to go to bed earlier, and then afterwards, yeah, but then I get tired, or at night, and with the kids,
Mhm.
and these are very valid reasons. But that means you're prioritizing an hour of sleep longer over that hour of that you could exercise, or spending that time with your kids, versus maybe that you wanted to read that book, right? So that's really the concept of how you can look at this. And the funny thing is, I don't know, do you have kids, Michael?
Yeah, I have to.
You have two kids, right? So do you remember the moment? Can you remember the moment before you had kids and after you had kids, and what happened with your time, and how you now look at time, and how much more efficient you've become?
Yeah, I still have the same 24 hours, but I tend to waste much less time than I used to before, because back then it's like, nothing in the morning, nothing in the evening. And now I need to take care of the kids in the morning as well as in the evening. So definitely, your point with prioritization, that totally makes sense in this context as well as at work.
Yeah, no, and that's all there to it, right? And it was this
Mhm.
thing, and I was, because I write a lot, right? And I'm very passionate about this, as you can tell. And I was writing my post because I flew from Amsterdam to New York, and it's a day flight, easy day flight, right? And I was working almost like until my battery was dead. At a certain point, I was like, okay, like enough is enough. And then I looked around me, and I think in all of the seats around me, there was only one other person that was working, and the rest was all watching a movie. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, absolutely not. And I did watch a movie at the end, kind of like skip through it, Eternals. I wouldn't recommend it, but it's great for in the plane in that sense to watch. But I just had 5 hours for myself, with no distractions, with no email, with no calls, being in almost flow state of writing my LinkedIn post for the next month and a half, right? Amazing opportunity. But again, it's kind of like, how do you look at time, and what are you willing to sacrifice in that sense in order to get what you want?
It's also about the discipline, as you mentioned a while ago, right? The discipline and priorities that eventually matters and can help you become more successful in entrepreneurship as well as in recruitment. And since you are in this unique position where you have these 30, 40 sourcers in the team, what would you say really make a great sourcer, right? You have all these people on the team. So are some of them more disciplined, or do they prioritize work better? If you look at the top performers in your sourcing team, what is different? What can other recruiters just watching or listening to you, what can they take from your existing team, and what can they replicate?
If we look, and I've had many discussions with my team and also with my co-founder on this, is our top performing sourcers, and it's kind of like the example that I gave before, are the ones that are able to intrinsically motivate themselves every day to stay focused the actual work. And one of the things which is great about our model, but also tricky about our model, we are a fully remote company, right? So people work by themselves in their home. I don't know how your transition was from. Did you have an office? I don't know. Like, or do you work fully remote?
I'm in an office now. Yeah, I have an
Yeah, you're
office,
in the
but
office,
it
right?
looks, yeah.
So,
It
so
looks like it looks like at home, but it's intentional.
oh, is it? No, it looks great. It looks great. So I don't know how it was for you, but I remember like first time for me working remote, or like working from home. It was back in the early days. I was super distracted. I was like, let
Mm,
me do the laundry very quickly. Oh, I got the
yeah.
groceries coming in. Oh, wait, let me do. And before I knew it, I was doing all these chores and a little distraction. Oh, I'm gonna get this coffee, and then I'm going to start, right? because there was, again,
Yeah,
there
yeah.
was no one holding me accountable. There was no one in the office like just working next to me, right? Like so that discipline. And what I've seen is that the sourcers that are the top performers are the ones that can really put themselves for a longer period of time in that flow state and be productive for a longer period of time and be very efficient with their time. Because especially
Mm.
sourcing, it's very easy to lose yourself with irrelevant candidates, irrelevant profiles, um, spending too much time on things that don't really matter or move the needle. And also, it's a job which takes a very strong mindset and discipline to do for a longer period of time. Where
Mhm.
recruiters are often more lived by their agenda because interview now and go, interview now, quick follow up, interview now. Like you're much more
Mhm.
lived by your agenda. Where if you look at a source's agenda in general, it's much emptier, right?
Mhm.
So what we've worked as well, and this is one of the things in general. What works very well is to work with very tangible daily, weekly, and monthly results. And I'll let me first give the example of how I've done that in my life. Remember, like the ADHD, borderline, kind of like non-structured. Also, if you look at my color profile, right? Like my color profile, extreme team, extreme extrovert, extreme bias for action, process and structure, almost non-existent, right? Luckily, my co-founder is my complementary health and structure and process. It can really hijack myself, right? In terms of for myself being productive. So I had to create a system and process in order to keep myself accountable and in check. And what I've done, and this is what I do with everyone in my company, and I can only recommend it, is at the beginning of the year or at the end of the year, I look forward to the year after, and I structure my yearly goals on business, personal growth, physical, and physical I mean like running a marathon, for example, family, friends, finance, and a greater good. And for each of those items, I think for myself, what do I want to achieve this year? Where do I want to be this year? And what do I find important? And I write them down in very clear goals. So, for example, I want to grow Matcher to 2.5 million turnover this year. Business goal, very concrete, right? On a personal level, I want to build my passive income times 2 this year. Very concrete goal. Family, I want to spend 3 nights per week without iPads or TV with my family. I want to learn Serafima, my stepdaughter of 11, about the value of money and entrepreneurship, right? I run. I want to run an ultra marathon this year. That's one of my goals. Write them down. And then what I do, I publish those goals so that I have other people know about my goals, but it also helps me hold myself accountable, right? That's step one. Step two is then every quarter I look at those goals and I make smaller goals out of that, right? I want to run an ultra marathon. That means I need to train X amount this quarter, right? I want to teach Serafima about entrepreneurship. Okay, cool. We're gonna earn a lemonade. We're gonna set up a lemonade shop, right? So etc. And then what I do is there's quarter goals I put in monthly goals, and the monthly goals I put in weekly goals. Very tangible, direct results. Because the hardest thing with year goals is they're so far away. Jesus, when I was working at Unilever, I even forgot my goals at some point. It's like, oh yeah, wait, we need to evaluate, right? Like that's almost how they are. Those weekly goals, but here's the magic, and this is the biggest productivity hack you can have. This all sounds great, and everyone understands this concept, but you need to have someone that holds you accountable for your goals. If
Mm.
I close the loop, right? So what took me 7 years of trying to figure out of being an entrepreneur, of not having a boss, I realized I needed a boss again. I needed to have someone that holds me accountable and says, Adriaan, what have you done this week? Are you on track? Are you on track on your goals? And someone, it's important because I've experimented with this. It needs someone that you respect and respect for a longer period of time. I worked with a coach that didn't work very well because at a certain point I didn't start to respect him. It started to feel like homework. It was like, oh, annoying. I need to do these goals. Like I was getting annoyed with it. I now do it with a peer entrepreneur, one of my closest friends, and every week we do a check-in, and he just holds me accountable for my goals, and I do the same with him. And we've been doing this for a year and a half now, and this has made myself so much more productive without having to work harder, right? Because I'm prioritizing my time much better. And then coming back to who are good sources and good recruiters are the people that are very conscious about their time and that know very, very well what they need to do, which activities in order to be successful. And have the discipline, because that's the hardest, and have the discipline to stick with that every single day.
Wow, now you just nailed it. Like so many different but very important aspects of the success at the end of the day. It's the prioritization, also time management to a large extent, since we all mostly work remotely these days. Plus the accountability, like really I just need to improve myself, right? Like now after this podcast, I'm just thinking, what do I do next? Just get a coach. I used to have one, also someone who I was paying on an hourly basis for, but somehow it just didn't feel right. So probably a similar problem as you just described. At some point it felt like homework, and I was like, oh well, it's daunting and doesn't really help. Like I have some other priorities now. Like this is not a priority to talk about priorities.
Yeah,
but I guess
yeah,
I guess we should create some group for recruiters, for sourcers to to help them find this accountability partner, because they may not have the cash to pay for a coach. Like there are people who specialize in this kind of accountability coaching, right? But what you are saying is also interesting, because you essentially just need a peer. So for you, it is a peer entrepreneur. For a recruiter, it could be a peer recruiter or a peer sourcer.
yeah.
So that's great suggestion.
But you don't. So why I say you don't even need to have someone that understands your industry. So my friend, I mean, he understands what we do, but he runs a cereal brand, right? Like we're very far off in terms of industry. But I respect him, right? Like I respect him for holding me accountable. That's the most important. That's why my first two coaches didn't work, because to your point, certain point it started to feel like homework. I was like, oh, I need to do these goals. I was hijacking myself, and we're so. It's the easiest thing to do, right? Everyone knows. That's so funny, right? Like, think about a couple of examples, right? Like everyone knows that smoking is bad, but like let's this one last cigarette, like there's one last cigarette, right? Diabetes patients, right? I think 60% are unable to change their diet, even though they know they might die if they don't, right? That's a crazy statistic.
Really?
And the same with exercising, right? Everyone knows. Like so many people say, like I need to exercise more, but then don't, because habit change is the hardest thing to do. And I'm not a saint here, absolutely not. I'm the other way around, actually. I have a great way of telling myself stories and hijacking myself in that extent. But now, like with someone that actually holds you accountable, research has shown, I think it's like 67% of people that have someone externally hold them accountable are able to achieve their goals. And that's
Wow,
and you just ask someone in your networks, like, hey, I've heard this on the podcast. Let's try this for a month. Let's hold each other accountable. Let's put the things that we find important for this month in our agenda at blocks when we need to do it, because then you get conscious about your week, what you want to do, and see if it works for you. See if it works for you.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, usually at the end of the interview, I like to ask, what's your final advice? But I'm not sure I'll ask you, because like, can you really, like top it with something, even better than this one? Like this is really cool. And like to all recruiters who are watching or listening this on a podcast, like they should really give it a try, right? So this accountability, even the prioritization and planning for the year, and the planning daily basis, planning daily tasks, like that's really cool. Something that they should do, especially once people work at home and they don't have the colleagues watching them, observing them, which normally creates this pressure. So yeah, very cool, very cool. So I don't know, like shall I really ask you this question? What's your final advice? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
go for it. Why not? Why not?
After everything you said. so to so to all recruiters out there who are thinking about, some of them actually just think about transitioning to IT recruitment, and it may feel a little distant. Some of them are already in IT recruitment, but feel like they are a bit lost because of all the IT terminology and stuff. So what would you say? What would be your best advice to someone who is now, at the beginning of their career in IT recruitment, and they don't know, if this is right or not for them?
The question that, and anyone on this podcast, I could even ask it to you, Michael. What would you do if you know that you wouldn't fail? If you know you could do whatever, like you feel like, or that you're paying, whatever that might be, and you know that you wouldn't fail, like that the risk of failure wasn't there. I find it such a powerful question. What would you like? What's the first thing that comes up when I ask you that question, Michael?
Well, I just would do what I'm doing already, because I know that I'm not failing. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but
is,
it's a really powerful question. Yeah, because if you change, yeah,
exactly. But is there something down the line that you might say, hey, it's the bigger vision, or like something there where you feel energy, but yeah, you don't know how yet, or you don't know what's really going on, right? Do you have something like that, Michael, on the top of your head, your dream?
Not really. Now I'm quite satisfied with this kind of business. So not really.
Amazing. So that's great. So you've gone the transition. I have many things that I'm like still worried about, or like I'm not sure if I can pull it off, or like, but like I feel energy. But yes, there's definitely chance of risk, and weighing your options, especially for people wherever they are in a career. Ask yourself this question, right? Like, what if you wouldn't fail? What would you do? Would you move to IT recruitment? Would you want to be a business owner? Would you want to be a manager? Like, what if you couldn't feel, right? Like, what would you be doing? And that's a very powerful question, often to ask, where people are often not taking action because, yeah, there's this unknown, there's this failure, there's this fear of not being able to do it. And let me give you one example what I've learned, because I've started to train for ultra marathons since 2 years. I really like the physical challenge. I like it's both physical but also very, very mental, of getting through and running for over 50 kilometers, and this year 100 kilometers. But it has taken me 15 years to get there, right? So my first race that I ever did was a 5 kilometer race when I was like 18 or something. And that unknown at the start is still the same feeling I get in my stomach when I started this year for a 50K run. It's the unknown. It's like, oh, like, I don't know, am I ready enough? Am I good enough? Like that's kind of like leap of yeah, into the unknown. And now that I've done all these steps, right? I've done 10K, 15K, 25K, done 30K, I've done a full Ironman, right? That has all built up my confidence over time to now know it's like, I'm very nervous about it, but I think I can do a 100 kilometer run. But what if I would tell you, Michael, that I know now, because I've experienced all of that I know that tomorrow, if we start to train together, we can both do the 100K run, even though you don't have all this experience, right? And that's the limiting belief. If you know that you can't fail, how powerful that is, because we can do so much more than we often think. So just don't be afraid. Just do it. Just step in, and that's honestly where the growth lies. So that would be my advice.
Very cool. And surround yourself with the right people who can actually help you get there, right?
Yeah, no,
building
100%.
up on your example, why to discover it yourself alone if someone who has already these 15 years of experience can help you get there faster and easier.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Very cool. Awesome. Yeah, thanks. This was so helpful and so interesting to see how you think about entrepreneurship and the productivity, and how this could be applied in recruitment, and how can sourcers actually get better at sourcing, and how can someone even identify if he or she is a good fit for this kind of a job. So yeah, thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts and all the insights.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Michael. Really, absolute pleasure to talk about this.
Thank you. We'll catch up soon. So yeah, thanks a lot. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy New York.
Thank you. Bye, Michael.
Bye.